evidence continues Tsai's organization staged another offensive against people's perceptions. News reports claiming that China was responsible for spreading rumors that Tsai had faked her thesis started appearing. This story circulated on most major digital and online news outlets. The story said He Jianhua of Taiwan's Unionist Party received 30,000 RMB during the presidential election in January to slander Tsai's campaign and spread rumors that her credentials were falsified. The report said China provided the disinformation. A case against He is now being pursued under the National Security Act. The news report said after He took the money, she acted under the orders of Huang Xingyu, organizing events and disseminating fake news. The report went on to say that the false information was forwarded to Dr. Dennis Pang and other organizations to stir up controversy prior to the election. News reports were highlighted in yellow as if to emphasize Dr. Pang's role. That same night, the Democratic Progressive Party pivoted and published a statement. In response to recent reports of the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office discovering the source of disinformation regarding President Tsai Ing-wen's thesis, DPP spokesperson Yan Ruofang says that the case is still under investigation and that the party refuses to comment. The DPP, however, reiterates that evidence legitimizing Tsai's thesis and degree has been shown throughout the presidential election. The thesis is open and available to the public. Yan says that according to media reports, the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office's investigation reveals that the disinformation about Tsai comes from China. If true, then it proves that efforts to attack and slander Tsai via fake news were that of outside hostile forces. As predicted, Tsai's organization is trying to spread the false notion that ThesisGate originated in China. Sanli, the Central News Agency, the Liberty Times, Formosa Television, and other media outlets close to the current administration are all spreading this narrative. Online users and other Tsai supporters gave this story massive exposure. News reports directly said Tsai's doctorate is legitimate, and claims contrary to that belief were the work of China. Furthermore, these stories seemed to suggest that Dr. Dennis Pang was working on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party.
Pieces of legislation last year, which prohibited the spread of disinformation and news, particularly under the Commission from the hostile foreign powers.
War on perception of this magnitude doesn't require much truth-telling. All it really needs is hype. Netizens are easily brainwashed under the Taiwan model and manipulated by the government's own brand of disinformation. When we break down this news story, serious issues begin to arise. Issues that give away its fabricated nature. First, what proof do prosecutors have that proves Tsai's thesis isn't fake? Is the purpose of its press release to find Chinese funds, or is it to vouch for Tsai during this troubling time? Second, the Unionist Party didn't start holding protests until November 20th, 2019. EPM started reporting on Tsai's thesis as early as June 10th, 2019. If you wanted to say the Unionist Party acted on behalf of China, then you can't say China is the source of thesis whisperings, can you? Both Dr. Dennis Pang and Professor Huan Si-lin traveled to London to investigate the matter firsthand way before the Unionist Party published its first statements. Can you really say the CCP is the source of this scandal? Third, each media outlet described the events of the story exactly the same. This means that these news stories were preemptively written and distributed by the same source. The Taipei District Prosecutor's press release said the Unionist Party provided its disinformation to Dr. Dennis Pang and Professor Emeritus He Defen. All media reports from major news outlets removed mentions of Professor He to emphasize Dr. Pang's role in this scandal. That way, Dr. Pang and, by affiliation, EPM are connected to Chinese money. Both had their credibility destroyed. Is it mere coincidence that these outlets just happened to emphasize Dr. Pang? Here, the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office has provided the material for the media to hype up and distribute to the people. Without a doubt, this was an order that came from higher up. If media personnel did a little digging and used simple logic, they would be able to craft a better and more precise story. However, these major media outlets have aligned themselves with the presidential office. Why is it we're so certain that the media is working with the government? Because of one simple sentence in the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office press release. It mentioned Dr. Dennis Pang. The prosecutor's office said that it did not discover any tangible records that He had distributed disinformation to Dr. Pang. Further proves that EPM's own investigation and the Unionist Party's information has nothing to do with one another. Anyone with simple reasoning skills can discern that the district prosecutor does not believe Dr. Pang took orders or money from China. Otherwise, they would pursue legal action against the three scholars as well. Why is it then that the media completely omits this detail from their reports? Every media outlet left this part out. Why? To drag Dr. Dennis Pang's name through the mud and to paint the ThesisGate movement as the work of Chinese interference.
Particularly under the commission from the hostile foreign powers.
How can this be construed as anything but the media helping Tsai's administration push back against ThesisGate? Dr. Dennis Pang decided to pursue legal action against these media outlets. It was at this point that the Liberty Times newspaper swiftly updated their story to include the information that absolved Dr. Peng. However, it was too late. The damage had been done. Stories painting Dr. Peng as an agent of China had begun to spread. In fact, the consensus was that anyone who so much as questioned Tsai's thesis was bending to the will of the Chinese government. Tsai's organization is retaliating against us for exposing the Boston photograph and Tsai's time at Soochow University in 1983. At the same time, it is a warning to people looking into ThesisGate. The establishment has ways to make innocent people guilty. However, if we look at this from another perspective, it proves that Tsai's organization is running out of moves. All they have left is accusing ThesisGate of being a movement manufactured by China. We've gone back and forth with the Tsai organization for a year and a half now. During this time, we've discovered that they're apt at using words and manipulating public opinion to change perceptions. They've sealed away documents until 2049, essentially burying the truth for the next 3 decades. Tsai's organization has even gotten the Education Ministry and the Central Library to play ball and say that Tsai's thesis is legitimate. However, those investigating the authenticity of Tsai's thesis have mountains of irrefutable evidence. They are determined to find the truth. In the courts, ThesisGate stalled for 323 days in one case and 406 in another before seeing trial. Tsai uses her power and influence to obstruct justice and truth. First, she manipulates the Justice Ministry by employing her trusted prosecutor Huang Wei. Huang dragged out a defamation proceeding, which Tsai brought to court herself. Under Huang, the case did not progress in any way. Tsai also employed the Foreign Ministry to stall letters and requests meant for institutions in England. Dr. Dennis Peng's case against Tsai Ing-wen was dismissed by the Court of First Instance even before there was a hearing. The case had to go to the Court of Second Instance before it was heard. Throughout this time, Tsai has had no problem silencing people who question her thesis by threatening them with the National Security Act. If she can keep people quiet, then she can win. She has to prove to the University of London that she can keep things under control. University of London and public sentiment over ThesisGate in Taiwan are currently at a balance. So long as this balance is maintained, then the truth behind ThesisGate remains hidden away. The University of London wants to stay out of the discussion, but it also must protect its interests. In 2013, when Sajith Premadasa's academic fraud scandal first surfaced, the University of London spoke up for Premadasa. It wasn't until the Colombo Telegraph exposed the truth that the University of London caved to public pressure and admitted fault. With regards to ThesisGate, University of London offers vague and broad responses to suppress Tsai's scandal. They claim that publicizing the identities of Tsai's external examiners would result in personal distress and harm. That is the reason why they have not done so. However, from a legal standpoint, the school must tread carefully when it comes to ThesisGate, because our investigation may have more evidence that we let on. It can't afford to antagonize the ThesisGate movement lest it become a target itself. That is why the school hired top-tier law firm Pinsent Masons. The University of London must make sure everyone questioned gets their story straight. One inconsistency One deviation is all it would take for their house of cards to come crashing down. In the same vein, if public opinion in Taiwan had enough momentum, then it could shatter this fragile charade. At that point, the University of London would spill what it knows in an effort to come clean with our investigation and to maintain its academic integrity. To Tsai Ing-wen, this battle with ThesisGate is a winner-take-all scenario. She and her national security team must use every resource to protect themselves and obstruct public opinion. That way, she can keep the University of London at ease. Do not be surprised if EPM and Dr. Dennis Pang have their credibility destroyed. Do not be surprised if Dr. Dennis Pang is imprisoned one day. Each one of our viewers have bore witness and accompanied us on our journey for truth. We will not let the efforts of history be in vain. Since the beginning, the presidential office has been overt in their cover-up, presenting nothing but baseless documents as evidence. They have nothing that can tangibly respond to the core issues behind Tsai's thesis. We wanted to use evidence presented in the Taipei District Court to leverage a testimony from the University of London. However, the Foreign Ministry blocked our requests before it could be sent out. It said that the channels required for the requests to be honored do not exist between England and Taiwan. Our efforts to acquire answers from abroad hit a dead end. Dr. Huan Xilin and Michael Richardson repeatedly asked the University of London for details regarding Tsai's thesis. However, the school refused to respond. Questions asked include: Tsai's student record indicates she did not pay tuition in 1983 or 1984. Furthermore, that record indicates Ing-wen Tsai WD from course on October 11, 1982. Can a person receive a PhD at the school under such circumstances? If so, have other similar instances occurred at the University of London? According to our investigation, Michael John Elliott left the London School of Economics and Political Science at the beginning of 1983 to assist Margaret Thatcher's campaign to become Prime Minister. Furthermore, he never once published work relevant to international trade or law. Is it possible for Michael J. Elliott, a bachelor's holder, to advise a PhD candidate? Have other PhD candidates at the London School of Economics and Political Science had advisors with similar credentials? According to a response the University of London gave to the Information Commissioner's Office, Ing-wen Tsai's viva took place on October 16, 1983. That date falls on a Sunday. Do vivas take place on Sundays? Who were Tsai's internal and external examiners? Why would divulging their identities result in damage and distress on Tsai's part? Our investigation shows that Ing-wen Tsai's thesis, Unfair Trade Practices and Safeguard Actions, was not placed in any University of London affiliated library before June 28, 2019. Is this possible? According to the London School of Economics and Political Sciences rules regarding theses, a candidate's thesis can be held in private for at most 2 years. Why is it that Ing-wen Tsai's thesis can go 35 years without going public? What protocols are in place when a school library loses a candidate's thesis? Are there any follow-up procedures for replacing lost articles? In 2011, a book said to be Tsai's thesis was submitted to the University of London's Senate House Library. Senate House Library purportedly rejected that particular thesis and sent it to the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. IALS ultimately also rejected the submitted thesis. What was the reasoning for turning this thesis away? A black leather-bound thesis, purportedly to be Ing-wen Tsai's thesis, was sent to the LSE Women's Library on June 28, 2019. That book was then digitized. Under what procedure was this thesis sent and accepted? Do those procedures abide by the same rules that proper doctoral theses are subject to? According to a document published by the British Library, Ing-wen Tsai's thesis on fair trade practices and safeguard actions was entered into the Ethos database in June 2015. Under what protocol was this entry created? On October 8, 2019, the University of London released a statement on its In the Press webpage. The statement was titled LSE Statement on PhD of Dr. Tsai Ing-wen. Which department at the University of London authorized this statement? According to the University of London's rules regarding replacement degree certificates, a statutory declaration or proof of loss is required to apply for a new diploma. Did Ing-wen Tsai submit the relevant documents to obtain her replacement diplomas in 2010 and 2015? In August 1983, Ing-wen Tsai was already a lecturer at Taiwan's Soochow University. How is it possible that Ing-wen Tsai submitted a doctoral thesis and completed a viva during that time? Tsai's organization can now only rely on painting the ThesisGate movement as a campaign conjured in China. This means that they have no more evidence to present. They continue to use the power of the establishment to intimidate scholars that seek the truth. The government will frame honest and loyal individuals to get what it wants. Dr. Ted Lau received a PhD in mathematics from Ohio State University. He submitted an article reminding people the dangers of persecuting people under national security laws. Lau pointed out that the tactics being used today to suppress democracy are similar to those used by Taiwan's government during martial law. Lau says the incidents back then had fortunate circumstances which kept democracy safe. Can we say the same for Taiwan society today? ThesisGate is not a race against time. It is a test of faith, perseverance, and justice. Believe us, we can emerge victorious.